Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. It's a beautiful Sunday morning here in the Rogue Valley. Getting a little work done before the family wakes up. This is the quiet time. So I'm looking at a Super XL here, and I wanted to go over a few things. Commonly get questions on, like, how in the world does this thing assemble? I mean, it looks pretty simple. Normally, there should be 5 bolts, screws, whatever, right there, holding this drive case cover to the crankcase. And it looks like you can just pull those out and get this thing off. That's not the case. The way Homelite designed this is all a big assembly, and there's only one way it can go together. So you've got, obviously I've got the cylinder head off right now. You've got the rod, which is screwed in place. You know, the bearing cap is held in place to the crankshaft here. In order to get this whole assembly apart, this is the first piece that has to go. You've got to get the connecting rod out of there. You cannot remove the crankshaft or the drive case without getting that out. Now the trick is there are 31 little needle bearings in there, and each one is going to fall the minute you unscrew this. But we've got to do this because the drive case was loosened up and attempted to be removed, and that tore that little thin gasket that's in there. And you can see all those needles. I'll try to keep the camera good. I also don't want to lose these needles. These are almost always in good shape and can be reused. The trick is keeping them all on your workbench. So I like to tap it. I'll get most of them out. You want to be careful with these gaskets too. They're meant to be reusable. And they're quite expensive. Now you can see that silicone. Somebody's been in here before. These don't need silicone. Silicone is only for if you don't have a gasket. You don't need to seal one of these gaskets with silicone, because attempting to do so is going to actually result in a worse seal or just plain old leak. Okay. Like I say, it's hard to see. Okay, there's still another needle floating in there. Come on, baby. By the time these get some oil on them, the fuel mix. Alright, that looks like everything. So from here, since those screws are already out, this drive case should come off fairly easily. Now I say that, and I doubt that I'm going to be able to do it one-handed here, so I'm using this damn phone as a camera, since I still haven't figured out where I misplaced my actual digital video camera. There we go. Sometimes you've got to tap this. I did not. That came loose quite easily. Get my hands cleaned off here. So, you see how this split apart. Crankshaft's still in that drive case. I'll show you why in a minute. But first, here's the whole reason it had to come apart. That little thin gasket broke during the attempted removal. Now this little gasket, believe it or not, is getting harder and harder to come by as well. And the guys that are selling them on eBay want anywhere from 10 to 15 bucks a gasket. If you have time to sit down and cut your own gasket, you need some pretty thin material. You could probably do it. I don't have that kind of time, so I source these things where I need to, which means it can be an expensive little proposition. So, why is the crankshaft stuck to this? Right there. screw washer, and then that's the bearing that's sticking out. That's how Homelite retained this. So the bearing and the crankshaft are an assembly that's driven into this drive case, and then those two screws hold it there to keep it from walking back out. The bearing is retained to the crankshaft with a snap ring that you can't see, because it'd be basically between the crankshaft seal and the edge of the bearing where it would sit flush in that housing there, holding the bearing to the crankshaft. So you can beat on this thing until you mushroom that crankshaft and you'd never get it apart. So don't do that. Follow the assembly manual and take it apart one piece at a time. So if you needed to service the bearing, you would pull this screw out, rotate your crankshaft, pull that screw out, press this whole thing, the bearing and the crank, out of that drive case as an assembly, and then remove that snap ring and press the bearing off of the crankshaft. Now, it's pretty uncommon for this bearing to go bad. I have seen it, but it's uncommon. Typically, you're going to be looking at, if it's been straight gassed or if the thing's been sitting in a moist environment for too long. That's where you run into that kind of trouble. So one more thing, I'm going to open this can of worms. Probably get a little hate mail, but that's okay. This cylinder, I know it's tough to see in there. Alright, I'm having trouble. You can see right at the edge of the skirt in the lower right hand side a little scoring. It's not bad, but you can see where this muffler port was cleaned out by someone. They did a really nice job of it, but all those scrape marks tell me this thing was carboned up bad. And the carbon scoring on the piston, that's not heat, that's carbon. That's carbon buildup, and you can see it actually still in one of the grooves there. Now this piston's still perfectly usable. I've seen far worse than this make good compression. I will put new piston rings on here just to start over since it's been cleaned up, but what caused that was running too much oil in the mix. And you can look on the forums, you can read about all this. Guys have damn near gotten into virtual fist fights over fuel mixes. The long and the short of it is, oil today is so far superior to the oil 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's not even funny. I've seen a lot of guys say, hey, Homelite said 16 to 1. I'm running 16 to 1, and if I want to, I'll run 8 to 1. You can go right ahead and do that. But if you do it for too long, you are going to carbon up your engine because it doesn't need that much oil. Modern oil lubricates so much better. I run my Homelites, my old ones, 50, 60-year-old saws. I run them at 80 to 1 using AMSOIL Sabre. Now, that's not for everybody. I understand that. But your good quality mixes from Still, from Husqvarna, there's others out there, all kinds of them. I'm not talking about the Walmart, $4.99 special. But there's no reason that these saws can't run at least a 32 to 1 mix. And when you're pulling the trigger, if you're getting a massive burst of smoke, you're running way, way too rich. It should be a light haze, if any visible smoke, once it's warmed up. So do yourself a favor, tune your saw properly and run the right mix so that you don't end up scoring a piston. Maybe this one will live. If you score one badly enough, you can't use it. And, what if that piston's not available? Not a good thing. So anyway, I'm going to keep going on this, but I just wanted to record that disassembly process.